Hey everybody, Austin here, and today I figured I'd do a video that I haven't done in a while, and that is stuff that deserves a physical home video release. Now, I've done TV shows, I've done Cartoon Network TV shows, in fact I got a shirt right here, whoopie-doo, and most of those are coming true. I've done other TV shows that deserve a complete series release. I'm still waiting for some of those to come true. And today I figured I'd do some movies that deserve a physical home video release, whether it be on DVD or Blu-ray. And there's going to be some pretty interesting ones because at least two aren't even available on VHS. That's right. They aren't even available on a VHS tape. That's how obscure those two films are. But for the most part, it's going to be stuff that I find interesting, and one will mostly be out of respect, and the other will be for curiosity. And so with this in mind, let's check some of these out. Let's start this off with a rather obscure film that feels rife for internet satire and mockery that during the late 2000s and the 2010s was rife for this sort of programming on, well, the internet. And that is this little known, little seen 1981, it got a wide release in 1982, but 1981 war movie, Inchon. And it's a very interesting film because it's got a cast that includes Laurence Olivier, Ben Gazzara, Jacqueline Bisset, Toshiro Mifune, and even the late David Janssen of The Fugitive, the original TV series. It has that cast, it has Jerry Goldsmith doing the score, and it even has Terrence Young of Dr. No from Russia with Love and Thunderball as a director. It's interesting in that regard, and one of the most interesting things about this film is that it was produced by the Unification Church. Yeah, I'm not kidding. It's such an interesting film, and I'll be honest with you, this movie is terrible. The only reason I even know about this movie is because it was featured on the Cinema Snob in January of 2019, and here's a clip from that review that best sums up the whole viewing experience.
It's a good thing that the notorious 1981 box office flop Inchon is the first movie that we're talking about in 2019, because once I'm done talking about it, it'll be 2020.
Yeah, no kidding. He said very vividly, this film is so drawn out, and this whole review feels like by the time you're done with it, it would have been 2020. So in theory, those who didn't watch this video at the start probably caused COVID to happen. Okay, joking aside, even for how terrible this movie is, even winning a Worst Picture Razzie and being even at one point holding the Guinness World Record for biggest movie money loss, it is a film that I do feel deserves some form of respect in terms of a more polished release in a widescreen format for those to actually view it, because the only way you've been able to see a lot of it is through bootleg recordings off of the Good Life Network, which was then owned by the Unification Church, which, as I've already told you, produced the film. And even so, it still deserves a polished release because it never got a VHS release, it's not available on DVD, and sure as hell ain't on Blu-ray. So, I'm just hopeful that this can get a more polished release so that more people can be able to view it. Even if the movie is a big stinker, but then again, I can already think of one stinker that I have to review, and that has a 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray release. So, if Batman and Robin can get that treatment, so can Inchon. Now, here's something that is very fascinating, and when you factor in the production of who produced it and what it's based on, and not just certain scenes that I can remember for interesting reasons, it makes for something so fascinating because of just how obscure this is. This is Gen 13. This is an animated movie that is based on a comic book series published by Wildstorm Productions, excuse me, that is now owned by DC Comics, and it was distributed by Disney. Yeah, you heard me right. A Disney distributed DC-based property. That is so unusual that it kind of makes you wonder how the world just didn't implode right then and there. But yeah, this is an adaptation of a comic book series, and it's directed by Kevin Altieri, who worked on some episodes of Batman the Animated Series, as well as did the music video for Do the Evolution by Pearl Jam. And it actually features a voice cast that includes Alicia Witt, it has Flea, Mark Hamill, Cloris Leachman, E.G. Daly, John Delancey. It's got certainly an interesting voice cast. And it also has some very interesting scenes, as I have mentioned. So, you're constantly wondering to yourself, why should this get a physical release? Well, while it did have a VHS release here in Europe, it actually was shelved by Disney when Wildstorm got sold to DC Comics in 1999. And it only ever had one screening at Wizard World Chicago in 1998, and since then, most of the time you can only find it on YouTube, and yeah, that's it. So, with this in mind, I hope that this gets a physical DVD, Blu-ray, or 4K Ultra HD release, whether through Shout Factory, Arrow Video, or even through Warner Bros. Themselves in case Disney decides to finally sell the property because, well, they're not doing anything with it, and they obviously don't want to have anything to do with something related to their rival company, so why not just give it to them? But, yeah, I do want this to get a physical release here in the US, especially since it actually looks fairly decent, especially when compared to Inchon, which, well, this is certainly a lot better, and not just because of certain scenes. Here is an ensemble comedy from 1980 that is directed by Robert Altman, a director best known for movies such as MASH, Nashville, Brewster McCloud, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, Popeye, The Long Goodbye, The Player, Gosford Park, A Prairie Home Companion, a lot of movies like those, and many more that I can't name them all here, but you probably know them a lot. Anyway, this is his 17th feature film, and it's called Health. Essentially, it's a parody and satire of the US political scene at the time, with a lot of the movie being set at a health food convention at a luxury hotel in Florida, where a big political organization is deciding on its next president, and all the while the election is filled with a lot of backroom deals and scandal, including with a businessman known as Colonel Cody, who is pretty much out to rig the whole thing and the outcome into his favor. It features a cast that includes Carol Burnett, Glenda Jackson, James Garner, Lauren Bacall, and Paul Dooley, plus additional cameo appearances from Dick Cavett and Dinah Shore, two of the most prevalent television talk show personalities at that moment in time. The movie's title is also an acronym, being called Happiness, Energy, and Longevity Through Health. And the very interesting thing about this is that this was pretty much Robert Altman's final film for 20th Century Fox, and it was shelved for over 2 years after its official release. There was some festival screenings, as well as a brief Los Angeles run during 1980. However, the film fell into obscurity, and it's not available on VHS, DVD, or Blu-ray, meaning it's nowhere to be found. There is a widescreen presentation for the film that is aired on places such as the Movie Channel and Fox Movie Channel, though, so there is evidence that there is something of a possible remastered version of this film that exists. It's just that it hasn't been released physically on home video yet. And really, I hope it does get something of that treatment, because it may not have done well initially. In fact, I think Ronald Reagan even disliked it. But there are also some of those, like Martin Scorsese, who actually named this film as being one of the 85 films you need to see to know anything about film. So there is a plus. Really, this film deserves a DVD and Blu-ray release, because it'd be interesting to check this film out and maybe give it sort of a resurgence that over time may have been forgotten. That, and really out of respect to Robert Altman, because that man crafted some of the greatest films of all time, and really to know that this isn't even available on DVD and there was never a VHS release for it is kind of shocking. So yeah, let's give this one a try. Yeah, I think I'll keep this one at normal volume. That last take was not adequate to how I wanted it to be. Too quiet. Anyway, to wrap this up, I figured I'd go over a film that I think I remember the longest time not being available on DVD. It was issued on VHS and Laserdisc, and has even been seen on digital marketplaces as well as even streaming on Tubi, but it's not on DVD. Like, that is just strange to me. And that is this little thriller from 1986 called Out of Bounds, which was directed by Richard Tuggle, who also directed another thriller called Tightrope 2 years prior, and also features the same cinematographer, Bruce Surtees, whom I have also talked about as having done Risky Business, as well as Dirty Harry and Beverly Hills Cop. And it stars Anthony Michael Hall in what was an attempt for him to essentially break typecasting following movies such as 16 Candles, Weird Science, and obviously The Breakfast Club. Coupled that with an attempt to try to make an adaptation of the Basketball Diaries, a boxing biopic, as well as an attempt to play Private Joker in Full Metal Jacket that ultimately never materialized. These were many attempts for him to try to break typecasting, and ultimately Out of Bounds was not a hit, only making $5 million on a budget of $9 million, and everything else just not materializing. Anyway, the plot of Out of Bounds basically centers on a farm boy who's sent to live with his brother in Los Angeles following the divorce of his parents. His suitcase ends up getting switched around with a drug kingpin's, which is filled with heroin. His brother is soon killed by one of the boss gangsters. Daryl is framed for the murder. That's Anthony Michael Hall's character. He's framed for everything else, and he basically sets out to clear his name. Yeah, that's basically the premise of the film. And like I said, this did not do very well. It underperformed and got mixed reviews as a result. However, it does have an interesting cast, such as Jenny Wright, who I mostly know for appearing in probably one of the best vampire movies you've never seen, Near Dark. Not to mention, also has Raymond J. Barry, who had some little appearances. In fact, he actually appeared in Falling Down. And he has Jerry Levine, best known for playing Styles in Teen Wolf, appearing in the cast. As for why this hasn't been available onto DVD or even Blu-ray, I'm guessing it may be due to licensing issues with the soundtrack, because the soundtrack featured the likes of Night Ranger, Belinda Carlisle, The Smiths, Sammy Hagar, and Susie and the Banshees, so that could be a reason why that ultimately has kept it from getting a DVD release. But even so, like, come on, man. Give this a DVD release, especially since this film, for those who want to see it, because they probably grew up watching a lot of movies starring Anthony Michael Hall and kind of wondered what happened to him over time, I think it'd be best to actually put this out. So, here's hoping.
Now we wait.
And, yeah. These are some movies that deserve a physical home video release, especially here in the United States. Now, 3 of these are actually worth seeing or are of interest for me, while 1 is simply out of respect, even though it's terrible. But that's simply what I think. If you have some movies that are not available on DVD or Blu-ray and maybe have never even been issued on VHS, please let me know down in the comments below, and who knows, maybe I might put these into another installment of whenever I make these videos. So, with this in mind, I will catch you later. Take care.
I told you it would take all year to watch this. It's Christmas time again, and I had to resort to wearing last year's onesie because I couldn't leave the house.